Welcome back to our farmhouse. Today I want to take you along on some of the regular, everyday, mundane tasks as a homemaker, a stay-at-home mom of two young boys. I do work part-time, but for the most part, I am home with my kiddos and I am learning how to spend my days. I am relatively new to being home. I used to operate a forest school, which albeit was at my home, but I was engaged in my program work. So this has been about a year since we decided to close my forest school and start the next journey. We moved to my husband's childhood home. I'm learning about all the tasks that come along with being the carer of the home. I love it. Honestly, this has been my dream. And so, although it is very hard sometimes, I am really blessed, especially in this day and age when not a lot of families can have one parent at home. I am very grateful. And because I am a forest school educator at heart, I try my very best to get our kids outside every single day for many hours. Now, I will say this winter has been very hard for that. It's been a solid, very cold winter here where we live in Canada. And although I'm grateful for that, I'm hoping it kills off some ticks so we don't have to worry about those in the summer. It was hard to get my kids outside, and they're also at the age where they're just so opinionated about snowsuits and everything like that. And some days I think, well, whatever, we'll just not fight that battle. But we have had a bit of a thaw happening here in the last 24 hours, and so it was just that much warmer outside, so getting the boys out was a little bit easier. We've been having possums around our farm, which, speaking of ticks, they eat ticks, so that's great too. So my motivation to get them out was, let's go see if we can find a possum or some possum tracks. And we got out, we made it over to our playhouse, which has been behind some drifts of snow for a while, and we had lots of fun out there. When we came back in, it's always exciting to get warmed up by the fire, hang our clothes up to dry because we were soaking wet, and get my day started with some laundry, something that is just constant. If you are a mom or somebody who is in charge of their household's laundry or shares the task, you know it is constantly piling up. It never ends. So I am taking, I think, about 4 baskets to my living room to do some folding. I prefer to do this while the boys are having their nap time. It's definitely something I can do when they're awake. Out of all the tasks, that is definitely one you can do while they're like playing at your feet and stuff. And I'm not super particular about how things are folded. However, I do also like the opportunity to sit down and drink a cup of coffee, maybe watch a YouTube video while I fold the laundry. And sometimes I'm just craving to do that in the quiet. And so that is what I'm doing today, working away at this laundry. I also want to make some sourdough because we've been eating it so fast. I have to always have some on the go. So I'm going to make some and then feed some so I can start another round the next day. And the recipe I use makes 2 loaves, so that's great. So I'm going to start with my kitchen scale, measuring 650 grams of tap water. And then I'm going to add 250 grams of sourdough starter. See, I got a little bit more than that. Not a big deal. I'll just work with that. It doesn't have to be perfect when it comes to how much starter you put in. If you've ever seen a Danish dough whisk, this is what it's for. If you are a beginner sourdough, as I am relatively a beginner, I've just been using one of the whisks from my KitchenAid hand mixer, and it works just fine. But I do like mixing the sourdough starter and the water first because I feel like it incorporates the starter throughout the dough better than when I add it after with the flour. So I did that, and now I'm going to add some flour. So I'm going to do a mix of all-purpose flour and freshly ground flour. I forgot that I had some fresh ground flour from yesterday, and so I just added what I had there. So it's not perfect, precise fractions of how much of it is whole wheat or how much of it is all-purpose. But I'm going to make my flour, whatever percentage of the two it is, to 950 grams. So this loaf definitely has a lot more all-purpose than not. I'm typically lately been making my sourdough bread with about a third of the flour being fresh ground hard white wheat berries. So I'm going to mix these together again, and I also added 20 grams of salt, and then get in there with my hands a little bit so it all comes together into a ball. I'm not going to be too particular about this as long as it's mostly incorporated. And then I'm going to let it sit to autolyse, which means the flour is going to soak up some of the liquid a bit more all on its own. I like to do this in a Tupperware container because it just holds the moisture so well. I have a really dry house with the wood stove. I do find it helpful for my particular climate in my house. Some people maybe don't prefer that way, so you have to play around to figure out what works for you and in your house or where you're located. I like to set it by the wood stove to give it a little extra boost in action here. I will work away at my sourdough throughout the day. Most time-consuming part is just what I showed you, the putting the 3 ingredients together, and that takes less than 10 minutes, if that. I've never timed it, but it's not very long. And then throughout the day, I will do my stretch and folds, about 3 before I put it into the fridge. My little guy's singing behind me. I've been putting it in the fridge for its bulk fermentation, which is the first rise of the dough, and I've just been liking how that is working out. Previously, I used to do my second rise of the dough in their Banneton baskets in the fridge, but lately I've been doing the first rise of the dough, the bulk fermentation, in the fridge. Going to get dinner ready. I'm putting some pork chops into the crock pot from frozen. This is something I find myself doing because I constantly am forgetting to thaw meat for dinner, or even at the beginning of the week to put a bunch of frozen meat into a dish in my fridge to thaw and at least have some meat to pick from. I've just been forgetting to do that. When in doubt, I find my frozen meat and put it in the crock pot, cook it away in the afternoon, so at supper it's ready to either eat how it is or add to something. Now, my crock pot here, it says I set it to low. I actually set it to high for 3 hours and got these cooking. And then I made ham and cheese sliders with local cheese and buns from scratch, fresh whole wheat buns. And they were super delicious. And then I also had some leftover that I could put in a quiche the day after that, which was great. More and more, my husband and I are trying to buy quality materials for our clothing. I love 100% cotton. I've noticed about myself that as a highly sensitive person, I enjoy having natural fibers against my skin, and didn't even realize it that those were the items I was grabbing for more. I've been looking for 100% cotton dresses and shirts, and that means I need to take better care of them in my laundry routine, and so hanging things up instead of putting them in the dryer, even in the winter time. It is the next day now, and it has been raining all morning long. Yesterday morning was foggy, as you saw at the beginning of this video. Then it got super sunny in the afternoon. And then this morning we woke up to pouring rain, which most people dread, but I secretly love. It just is so cozy and romanticized. I don't know, I just love it. And so I was enjoying working away in my house while it was pouring rain outside. And I took the boys outside to splash in puddles too, of course. They're obsessed with puddles. I'm taking my dough that was bulk fermenting in the fridge out, and I'm shaping them into the 2 loaves. And then I'm going to place them in my floured Banneton baskets that are lined with tea towel, and set these in a warm spot to do the second rise. And then I will hopefully bake them later today. A laundry item that has been on my list for a while is to take my white tea towels and give them a thorough clean. I wanted to soak them in some Tide powder because I found a lot of little bits of sourdough stuck to them, which is kind of gross. So I needed to just give them all a refresh, which is why I bought 100% cotton white tea towels so that I could do a hardcore cleaning every once in a while of them without wrecking the coloring, obviously. So I'm going to soak them in a giant Tupperware bucket and fill it with Tide powder, and then I'm going to, after that, so that's soaked for about 24 hours, and then now I'm going to soak it in a bleach water for about 24 hours before I wash them. next day, and my sourdough loaves are ready to be baked. So I've got my loaf pans in the oven preheating at 500, and I'm going to flour my parchment and plop these guys down on there. I did end up throwing these in the fridge last night because I just wasn't ready to spend the time to bake them. And so for the first time ever in my sourdough baking, I've got some really nice Banneton circles on my loaves. Now I am tucking the dough underneath into a loaf pan shape. This is an artisan loaf recipe, and I do make it like this often. However, I've been doing it in a loaf shape for the last little while because it just fits better in the toaster and is more practical for my family. I also feel like there's less crust and so less bread wasted. Take all this time to make this beautiful sourdough. You don't want to waste any of it in a tough crust, and so if this is the way my family likes to eat it, then this is the way I'm going to do it. My tea towels have soaked in the bleach water for 24 hours, and now I'm going to take them and throw them in the laundry machine, wash them on a hot cycle, and then the dryer after that. Probably if it was the summer, I would hang them up in the sun on the clothesline so that they can get naturally bleached and dry nice and flat. I'm not going to iron these today, but sometimes I will take the time to iron them properly. But being a millennial, I've decided that that is one thing I am cutting out from what my mom would have done. Ironing, sometimes I will do it, but it is not worth the time in my everyday laundry cycle for me. These get used. These aren't my decorative ones, and so I don't need them to be perfectly flat all around. So I'm just going to go ahead and fold them and put them away just as they are. But it's nice to have them fresh and clean. My loaves baked in the oven for 500 for 30 minutes and then uncovered at 475 for 15 minutes, and this is how they turned out. I want to cut into it to show you how beautiful this dough is. Thank you for joining me today in the farmhouse for a regular day of mundane homemaking tasks. I hope you've enjoyed coming along with me, and I hope to see you back again next week. Please don't forget to hit subscribe and like this video. Share it with your friends. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.